Today in class, we've talked about different horizon lines, perspective and one point, and, talking about vanishing points, etc. So, what I want you to do for the next few seconds here is look at these different bridge perspectives. How do those cars look? What do you see in these videos here of bridges? Where do they go? What does it look like the structure of these bridges, too? And what are they going over? So take a moment now to just enjoy looking at these and start taking in some ideas of what you might use in your drawing today. So today we're going to be learning about one-point perspective, and we're going to be creating our own bridge. So I have a quick direction how-to sheet of how we're going to be creating our one-point perspective. And then I also have, would like you to take out a ruler as well as a pencil. Now, if you don't have a ruler near you, the next thing that you can use is you can also use your green folder that we have. So we've got our green folder. You can use one of the edges, you can use a book, and you can use that as your ruler for the time being. So the first thing I want us to do is we talked about horizon line, we talked about our vanishing point, and then we're talking about those O lines, right? So what we want to do first is create an X on our paper. So what I want you to do is using your ruler, don't worry if it's not going perfectly through your X. Like maybe your X is only on half of your paper here instead of all of it. You can do that too. So I will show you how about that way as well, but you can always do the line through this way. Remember when we use a ruler, I'm a lefty, so I always have my hand with my pencil on my left side, and then my right hand makes a backwards L shape, and it holds my ruler so it doesn't move around. If you're right-handed, you want to have the ruler on your left side, and then you're going to be holding it with an L shape. So this way, as you go to draw it, it works a lot better to keep the ruler from sliding. You also want to draw towards yourself when you're making the ruler lines. So you'll notice on here, I'm going to be using my ruler line by drawing towards myself. I lean my pencil into the ruler, I slide my ruler down, and I finish it off to the page. So you can see right here that this does not go to the corner, and that's okay. Today's is just practice, and then after that, if you're rewatching this to use it for your final copy, then you can also just remember that it doesn't really matter where those lines really end up because you're going to change it anyways. So we're making our X. You can start from a corner or you can decide not to start from a corner, just more at the top. Draw your lines. Now in this video, I'm making my lines a lot darker so that way you can see them. But in person, I want you to draw light because we'll be erasing these top lines here for our drawing. The next thing I want you to do is to do your vanishing point in the center of the X. So I have my little dot here, and that is my vanishing point. The vanishing point is where everything goes to simply vanish. It's where it gets smaller and smaller and smaller the closer it gets. So that's the most important. Through this, for our project today, you're going to create your horizon line. So remember, our horizon line is a straight line that's horizontal, and it tells us what is the sky and what is the ground. It separates everything. So this is our ground, right? Maybe this is all the ground, and say this is a road, and this is grass, and this is all sky. You can have it that way. For our project today, we're going to be creating a bridge and imagining where we are in our bridge. Where is it taking us? Is it taking you to a city? Is it taking you to a favorite video game? Place that you enjoy going and playing at? What's something that is fun for you? It could just be a city that's your favorite city to visit, or it could be something, that you add your own twists to. So our next step, and I've changed this around a few times. I normally like to teach by making our bridge, but what I'm going to have us do instead is to start with creating our city. So I like to start with just simple city lines. And what I'm going to do is start here. So I'm going to do a line for the top of one of my buildings, and I'm fitting it between these two lines here. And then I'm going to draw my vertical lines down, as you can see. So I'm going to keep doing that. You can make them really skinny. You can make them wide. Use your ruler. We talked about when we're making our lines, they need to be vertical the same as our paper. If I draw a straight line going sideways, it's going to look like my tower or building is falling down. So I don't want to have that. Our eyes are really smart. And as I'm drawing this, you'll notice I'm actually drawing this from an angle. So if it's not perfect, that's just kind of funny. That's what I'm drawing. So you might notice this one's not a perfectly vertical line. The way my setup is I am not exactly under it. So you want to make sure you're always underneath your work so you can really see what you're making. So take this time to, again, you're drawing a line for the top of your building, and then all you're doing are adding two straight vertical lines coming off of it like this. We're doing nice and simple, okay? If you felt like you wanted to overlap, you can always overlap a building, and overlapping is putting something in front of another one. So if you wanted to do it that way, you're more than welcome to challenge yourself with adding in some other things and just erasing. So now it looks like this building is in front of that building. Then you can do the same thing going to the back. Once you have one side, you can do your other side. You can think of some other things. Do you want a Ferris wheel? Do you want to just have the city? What are some fun things that you want to add to your part of your city? It's up to you. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to stick with what we're doing, but you could always find some other fun building designs online. Or, for example, if I really wanted to make, say, the Sears Tower, which I know is called the Willis Tower, but if I wanted a little bit of a Chicago outline, you can draw your building. It always looks like a little bit of a cake to me, and build it this way and have the pokes up there. So you can add in your building in any way that you want, okay? I'm going to continue with these over here. Okay, so now that I have this part done, the next part that we're going to do is we're going to make an angle. We have our O lines, right? Those orthogonal lines here. What I want to do is use this to help me create a three-dimensional building. So what I'm going to do is off of each of these sharp corners here, I'm going to make a little line. So you'll notice I'm following the same direction as this. I'm just drawing a little line coming right off of it. This one matches here, that one matches. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay. I'll do the same thing off of each of these corner pieces here. Okay? Once you have that part done, you draw a straight line to connect it down. And this gives it that illusion or look that it's a three-dimensional building. So just make sure as you're drawing it that your ruler is as perfectly up and down vertical as you can. And you can make this as skinny as you want or as wide of a building as you would like too. So now you can see how it looks like a three-dimensional building's going this way. When you do the other side, follow this angle. So you'll do the angle that way. And again, you can make things really wide where maybe it's falling on top, like not falling on top of, but it's behind another building. So you draw your lines in the direction of this one, and then you connect it by doing a straight line down. Here we go. So now that we have our city put together, we can always come back and add those other details later. What I want you to do is use your eraser, and we're going to erase these lines on the top here because we no longer need them. You'll notice as you're looking at this, these lines, I can still see them. So when you're doing this in person, I want you to draw light until you get it right. And you'll notice that you can still see my lines because I had to push really hard for our video purposes here. Now the next step that we're going to do is we're going to create our bridge effect. So I know we've looked at some different bridges and how the perspective would be if you're standing here on a bridge and you see the lines and the ropes, or maybe you're in a car and you're driving towards the city. What are you going to see? And what's going to be closer to you? Obviously, our buildings are a lot further away, and our rope for the bridge itself is going to be a lot closer and larger to us. So for this next part, we're going to draw what, some have said looks like a mustache, and I want you to make that line nice and thick. So remember, thin is where it's really tiny, and thick is where a line is nice and thick and wide, or fat, right? So we're starting in the center dot, our vanishing point, right? Because our line will vanish here. And I want you to draw a curved line up and over. So it can be really low, it could be higher, and I want you to just go and make this line nice and thick. Remember, things that get closer to you are going to be really wide and thick, and things that are farther away are going to be skinnier. So think of your rope about making it wider as it comes closer to you, right? It's getting bigger. and then it's not as big the further it goes away from you. Okay, so I'm going to do one more on this side. Now, as you look at this, you can see my city, and you can see my road here, and you can also see the water here. So what I want you to do next is, using your ruler, what we're going to do is we're going to draw our straight lines up and down. What I don't want you to think about is turning, if you have them straight, but you have them on an angle. So remember, whatever you're doing that's vertical needs to match the edge of your paper. So here's my paper. Here's my line. If my line looked like this, well, it's going to look like my bridge is falling down. So take this time to start. I always like to start from further away, from the skinnier part here, and working my way upwards. So the lines are going to be closer together, closer to your vanishing point, and they're going to be wider apart the further you get away from it. What I started to do here is I realized I wanted my rope, or these steel lines, to be thick. So what I ended up doing is I am doubling up the line. I'm not really going to color that in until I get ready to paint it or use some markers later, but I'm just making it a little bit extra. And you'll notice I'm not using a very sharp pencil, so you can kind of see a little bit of shading because my pencil's on almost like the duller side. So it gives it a little bit of extra look to it. And then I'm going to work on my other side. Normally, I like to speed up some of the parts of my video so it doesn't show as long and I can pause it. But for here, I wanted to show you this is how slow I go when I go to draw. I'm doing a line and then I just slide my ruler over a little bit. And that allows me to keep making my lines vertical and further spaced. So just a quick reminder, when things are closer to you, they're going to be bigger and they're going to be wider apart. And the further things are, I would have those lines closer together. One other little tidbit is, when I'm drawing my lines, I'm trying not to make the exact same lines as my building because I think that makes it a little bit more difficult or confusing later on. But for now, just keep drawing those lines and making them nice and thick, as you can see. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my road lines here. So on the bridge with the car, you're usually going through the road. So again, starting from my vanishing points, I'm going to draw two lines coming out, and this will create my road look. Now that I have my bridge done and I've got my outline of my buildings, I can take the time now to go in and make windows. So when you make your windows, we're going to follow that same kind of rule of you want the top and the bottom of your windows to match the line above it. So we're doing a nice straight one. And you can see I'm doing the same thing with our vertical lines here. But anything that is going to be on the angle side, meaning on the edge that looks like the building is three-dimensional, that line follows, again, the line at top, but that is the one that's angled. So anything that's vertical is always up and down. The one that changes is your horizontal line. It always changes. So I'm matching the top of this building here, as you can see, and I'm going to match my ruler to the vanishing point and connect it that way. So my ruler is right there at my vanishing point, and then I draw my angled line. So as you can see now, my windows look like they're getting smaller as they go in the distance because they are going to the vanishing point. So in the front here, you could do any designs that you're thinking. You can just, keep it the same by just having a couple lines on top and going across and making different patterns. You can make it artsy or wavy, whatever you're thinking. But anytime you're using the one on the angle, it has to go to the vanishing point. So anything that's facing straight towards you, normal. Whatever is going to that back to the vanishing point, it needs to go back there. So take this time. I'll be walking around, and if you have questions about going to the vanishing point on this, or you just want to draw windows on the front and not worry about going to the vanishing point on the other side, go for it. There's also something really fun about not using your ruler at this point too, and just quickly sketching out some different windows. So on the front part, you could do your sketches this way, but again, on that three-dimensional side, the one that goes towards the vanishing point, always look at the top line of the building and it'll give you a clue of what those horizontal lines need to look like. Make sure it's angling down or it's going to look like a jello building. Once you have finished adding in all your pencil details and your lines, what I want you to start doing next is we're going to outline the different parts of our drawing in Sharpie. So I have my Sharpies in their container. And remember that when you're grabbing it, you're just taking it out of one of these. You're pulling it out so that way you can double check if it's sharp. But when you're done, we replace it so that way the ink doesn't dry out. So take this time to go nice and slow and really retrace over your lines. Don't rush through it. You worked really hard on that. Use your ruler and be able to go through. Just do not trace over your O lines on the top up here. We did try to erase those. We're going to cover those with our background with a watercolor wash. and go from there. So the first thing I want us to do is trace over this in our Sharpie. Now that we finished outlining in black Sharpie, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use our paint. We're going to use our tempera cakes, and we're going to have our paint brushes as well as some water. And what I want you to work on first is let's get our background. You know, I think sometimes getting the water done as well as the sky and our sunset really sets us off for what are we looking for. So if you have, say, a sun right here that you have going, you know, sun that's setting in the distance, you could have all the changes of colors. You don't have to draw the sun. You can even just have the shades of the colors going through, and you can have the dark blues and some of those colors reflecting on here. And once we have those areas done, then it's easier to go in and go, okay, how do I want my buildings to look? What colors am I thinking with my buildings, and really playing with those other aspects. So in our sketchbooks, I wanted to show you just quickly here, because I've got my, sketchbook, is on the inside I want to play with, I know we've practiced with playing with our different designs in the past, finding a blank page. We're going to look at how, it feels to really blend these colors. So when I get my paintbrush wet, remember I dip it in and I just wipe the water on the side of our cup. And then I'm going to go grab a color. So if I grab a little bit of this blue, I know it's harder and trickier to see, but I'm not sure if you can see that blue showing up on here. And I could place my blue right on my paper. So when I'm painting, I'm not painting like this and making the brush have a bad hair day and really getting ripping my paper. The goal is to be very gentle when you paint and when you use your brush. So the rule is the more water you have, the darker the color is going to be. The lighter it's going to be. The less water is the darker. So more water, you can see it starts getting lighter and lighter and lighter. If I have less water on my brush, that means there's more paint on here. It's going to be nice and dark, as you can see on here. A fun trick when you're playing with watercolor or any of this type of paint is if you get your part of your paper wet first and you grab paint, you can go in and actually make these cool little bits of effects, just like this. So you could add in, I can grab in another color, and I can start blending colors. Now this sketchbook paper doesn't show blending as well. It doesn't let you practice a lot because it's actually a lot thinner. It's just sketchbook paper. It's really meant for drawing and, practicing some different techniques, but not much what we're looking for in our project here. So I'm going to use mine a little bit more. This paper is not watercolor paper where it's really thick. Instead, this paper is it's a thicker, 80 weight paper. So it's mixed media. It can handle watercolor, but not lots and lots of water and lots of building when it's wet. That's what your watercolor paper could do, a lot more of that. So for this piece, I really want to start focusing on my background of my water. And then I will fix back over some of my bridge lines and really darken that area. So it's easier to get darker, but it's harder to go from a dark color to a lighter color. So I'm going to grab my blue, and I'm just grabbing a little bit of it, right? And I'm going to follow the direction of what I think the water would look like. So I don't want to do up and down because water doesn't really go vertical, where I'm at. So I'm going to go nice and slow. I know I can put a darker color on top of my bridge lines, so I'm not very worried about these lines. I can come back to those. And when you start seeing brush strokes like this here, that just means you need some more water. So I can take water and just gently spread this even more. And then I'm going to go back and grab some more blue. So I'm going to grab some more. And you'll notice that each time you go grab more blue, it might wake up the blue even more, so it's easier to work with. You'll also notice that as I'm painting, I can turn my brush and use the side of it so I can really get into those areas. Like a nice thinking of your markers. If you have a thin line with the tip of your marker and then the thick line when you use the side of your marker. Same thing here. Turning this to the side, I make it a nice skinny line. Flat like this, I make a nice big thick line. So really go in and really cover in those areas of your water now. So now that I got my water started in this area, what I wanted to show you is I want to go in and add some darker lines of water, like some color of my water up along the top. So if you ever look at pictures of water, you're going to notice there's going to be a darker blue area, some lighter blue areas, medium. So you're really playing with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some more of my dark blue, but I'm going to keep it close to the edge up here and really close in here, because the further things go in the back, it kind of all darkens more, right? And the closer it is, it might be a little bit lighter for me. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to darken some of these other areas a little bit more. So here you can kind of see how it spread a little bit more. And I just had some darker areas, you know, thinking of my buildings, wherever my buildings are, I want to give a little bit of a shadow. So over here, I just want to have some more of the shadow with these darker buildings, or these buildings, because it should be a little bit darker, right? But I also don't want to take away all this nice transition of the light. So if you have some extra on your paintbrush, you can always go in and just add in like a little bit extra of some lines, and it just kind of gives it that watery look, as you can see here. So I'm going to leave this for this time being, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my top. I want to see how I'm going to create the top of this sunset. And for this part, I really want to add in my blues and some of my purples and maybe throw in a little bit of yellow and make it come together. And once that's done, then I can add some of those colors onto my palette or paper part here. All right, so let's add our background. I'm thinking of using, you know, these colors here, the yellow, the blue, and the purple. And I'm just going to kind of create my own. And I'm going to have more of my yellows and purples in the background here, and then work my way up to some different blues. So once you have this top part, then you can start sprinkling in some of these colors into your water. So now that we've got our top and our sides, you could really see how that is starting to come together. For this next part for me, I'm going to be using my black. And you notice that whenever I'm using my paintbrushes, I'm never mixing them on here. I'm mixing them more on my paper. So using my black, it can be a little bit tricky. But what I want to use with it is, remember, the less water there is, the darker that this color is going to turn out to be. So if I go around and I grab a lot, my paint on my paper is going to be rather pigmented and rather dark, right? So it's nice and dark. But instead of grabbing more paint, if I grab some water, I can spread it and I can actually make it thinner and lighter and make a really cool gray. So for my buildings, I want to have like the lights, and I want to have some grays and blacks, and I'm really thinking of more of a silhouette look. Because as you're coming in, I want some of those lights, but I'm also looking at, I want the bridge to be more about the sunset and the city, and maybe I'll add in some colors of these colors on a couple of these cityscapes just to show some reflection. But other than that, I'm more looking for the front of your building is going to be lighter and the sides are going to be darker shading, right? So for me, I'm going to have maybe these fronts be a little bit darker and the sides a little lighter because here's my sun. So I'm going to have my sunset, my sun going down here where there's reflections on these outsides, windows a little bit more because they can still see it, whereas these guys are facing the dark. So I'm going to have dark in the front and lighter on the sides. Okay, so I want you to get started with creating yours, and you can follow along watching me or doing your own thing. Always remember too, you can always turn your paper as you're working. So maybe I want to turn and work it this way because this area is still really wet and this is a little bit drier, instead of getting your hand touching on many other aspects. This can make it really tricky and difficult because it takes a lot to be able to go dark and adding some more water in order to have that lighter. So you could also use your color pencils, you can also use crayons, you can also do marker and then get your marker wet so it spreads. It's really up to you. So I'm going to use a little bit of mixed media and I'm going to take out some color pencils and I'm going to try doing some color pencil here.